Hi there, hope you're doing well. I've recently had the privilege of being able to participate in the Rebelle 8 beta program, and since it's now gone into early access, I can start to share some of my thoughts on what's coming through in Rebelle 8. So in this video, I want to talk through some of the new features, what I think, what I'm particularly looking forward to being able to use, and just generally share my thoughts. My name's Pete. Welcome to Basement Picasso. So there's quite a lot coming through in Rebelle 8. They've added quite a lot of features, and I think some of these are looking really, really impressive. The beta testing that we've been doing has been showing an incredible amount of promise, so it's really encouraging to see the state that they've got the program into. When Rebelle 7 came out last year, I was a little critical of the general state of the software, how many sort of bugs and issues there were at the time. So by comparison, this time round, it's been really encouraging to see the general quality of the software has been really good. And the team's been incredibly responsive with all the suggestions and the ideas and any bug fixes that have been coming through. So the whole phase of testing was really, really impressive. And I think it's really helped to get the program into a really good state. Now it is in early access. That means that they're still working on a few things. There's still a few features in development, and they're still sorting out a few bugs and defects. But the general quality of the software this time around, I think, is a real step up, which is really good to see. So they've got a lot of new features. We'll talk through a number of these. I think the main ones for me are the combination of the Bristle Brushes, the Real Shader, and the Soft Shadows. And the three of these together really play into a much more natural and traditional look. They give you a much better sense of surface and impasto and texture. And for me, it really fits into this approach that they're not going down the AI route. They want this to be a tool for artists. And I think this is part of doubling down on the traditional look and feel of the software. So if we have a wee look at some of these tools, now these are pro tools, just to be clear. So the bristle brushes, there's a number of brushes that are included by default, and these brushes have got a really nice sort of impasto. The brush itself, so there's two fundamental types of brush. The original brushes were texture brushes, which effectively stamp a shape repeatedly on the canvas, whereas the bristle brushes are actually simulating individual bristles, which allow it to build up colour and texture in a much more natural and realistic way. So each bristle is responding to the colours and textures that are there, and it can build up nice thick impasto and then work in terms of the way that it moves it around. As a traditional artist, we often talk about oil paints as being buttery. It's just that consistency. It's got a little bit of resistance. It moves in a very nice controlled way. It's sort of thick and you feel like you can kind of push the paint around. And I think they've done an absolutely exceptional job of having that sense of thick paint and being able to push it and blend it. So this is a new brush engine. I think is incredibly impressive. I think it's going to be fantastic to see how this moves forward. Personally, I'm very much looking forward to both using it and also to create some brushes for it, which I'll share on my Patreon in due course. But I think that the brushes that come out the box are a really good start in terms of just giving you a sense of how they work, how they interact, and they also support the sort of bigger brush sizes, so you can go up to huge sizes if you want. And I think what's really impressive is just how fast these brushes are when you work on them at a large scale. So the Bristle Brushes, now these aren't just purely for Impasto. At the moment, there's also out the box ones available for things like watercolor. So those obviously give you a nice sense of the sort of bristles and the textures, and then the watercolor will flow and react as you would expect. I believe that the bristle brushes will work in any category, so I think there's a huge amount that we're going to be able to do with these as we go forward. You've probably started to see already the visual settings. In the Pro version, we've got 3 options. So we've got Real Shader, Nanopixel, and Soft Shadows. So the soft shadows are really those nice big sort of soft ones that really help enhance the sense of light casting across the surface. What they've done with it's not properly ray traced because of the performance and the brush engine and so on, but they've found a really nice technique that sort of simulates the effect of those shadows. And you've got various controls on them, so you can make them bigger or smaller. So I'm still playing around to see what sort of settings look good, but you can definitely see the difference in terms of the Impasto surface with those enabled and disabled is certainly quite significant. And from the work that I've been doing, it looks and feels a lot more like natural, realistic texture. The Impasto just feels so much more convincing now. I think the possibilities of what we can do with this are going to be absolutely fantastic. So those are all looking really promising. The Nanopixel 2 export allows you to export up to much higher magnifications. So if you're doing high definition print work, or you want to blow something up to a very large print size, that will now support it, and that certainly looks quite good. And then the other 2 pro features, so there's smooth scaling. Now, I'm not sure if that is working correctly for me at the moment, because when we zoom in, you'll see that this is particularly pixelated. If we look at the preview window, if I can bring that over, when you zoom into that, it is a lot softer, and that was what I thought was the way that would work. So I'm not quite sure why the main canvas isn't working quite the same way. So I've reported that one. Hopefully that will get fixed. But the Real Shader and the Nanopixel, particularly at the moment, that definitely works in terms of being able to zoom right in and get these really nice crisp lines and textures. So that works, is looking pretty impressive. And the last one is the Photoshop import. I don't use Photoshop, so I will not comment on that one. So those are all pro features. And then there's a bunch of things that they've added for the standard version. Obviously, you get them in the pro version as well. The first one is the Symmetry tool. Now, this one is quite interesting because it works by painting the stroke with two different versions of the brush. So it's not duplicating the pixels from one side to the other. So hopefully you can possibly see that the stroke over the blue interacted with the texture, while this stroke over here interacted with the underlying canvas. So it's not just copying the pixels, it's genuinely running the stroke twice. So that's got some really nice potential, but at the moment it does feel a little limited because it is purely symmetrical around the center and it's horizontal. So you can't do vertical, you can't do 180 rotated, you can't do more than two strokes. So if you want to do some symmetrical work but not in the center of the canvas, you can do that, but it would just be a case of doing some work and then just moving it and shifting it. So you can do that as well. So what I suspect we'll see as this goes forward is more options will appear for the Symmetry. I think it's a fantastic start. I think it's really interesting to see how this is working. And I think this combination, and possibly other tools as well that use this multiple brushes painting simultaneously, I think that opens up some really interesting directions. So I think that's a great start, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with that going forward. We've spoken already about the brush size. That now goes up to much larger sizes and is much faster and smoother. So that's really good to see. That's really good when you're sort of blocking in a picture right at the start. You can really block things in very quickly now. Recent brushes. So originally there was a favourites category, and they've now added recent brushes to that. So when you select the favourites now, it's now favourites and recents. So you can add your own favourites in, and as you use brushes, you'll see that they start to build up, and then it's quite easy to go back and pick something that you've been using earlier. There's an option to clear the list out if you want to start with a fresh set of brushes. My thoughts and comments around that, I think it is the same for both recent and favourite. When they brought the favourites in, they were done as a copy, and it's the same with the recent. So if you make brush changes, what you're actually changing is this copy, not the actual underlying brush. And my personal preference is that I think these should be links, that there should just be the concept of one brush. If you're using a round bristle, it should be the round bristle from that category. So I've made a couple of suggestions around how that could potentially work, how you could save changes, how you could restore back to the default version that came with the program, that sort of thing. So there's no risk of accidentally changing a brush and losing the original settings. So it's great that we've got the recents, and it'll be interesting to see if they do anything different with that going forward. And then we've got the instant paper preview, and this, I think, has been done really nicely. I think for me personally, there's still a few issues around the fact that the papers are different to the Impasto, and there are certain times when you'll see with certain paper types, there's little things like the lighting just looks slightly different. Some of the lighting for some of the papers goes in different directions. It's just got a slightly different quality, and it can look a little sort of different. And sometimes it's just the way some of the tools interact between the impasto and the textures, particularly for the heavy textures, aren't quite there. But what I do like with this is the fact that you've got all the papers available. You can see anything that you've bought, but you can also see the ones that you haven't purchased. And there's now a mechanism where you can click on one of those papers, and what it'll do is it'll bring up this little prompt, tell you you've not purchased it. You're now in a sort of preview mode, and what you can then do is effectively test out that paper. It puts on a separate layer, so you're not actually interacting. You can see there's actually a little watermark underneath that as well. But it gives you the option to try out that particular paper, see if it's something you like, and if it is, you've then got that option to purchase it. If it's not something you're interested in, you can exit the preview, and that will effectively just get rid of that temporary layer that you made while you were testing it out. Now, the one thing I was a bit concerned about was if you don't have many papers, the ones you've purchased can get a little lost in this whole set of papers. But what they've done is actually give you a little option at the top where you can choose to show or unshow purchased, not purchased, or user made. So if you switch off, for example, the not purchased, then you're just left with the purchased or any user ones that you've added. So that gives you a much simpler interface. And I think that's a really good compromise. So you can see them all if you need to. You can see your own ones if you don't. And I think that works well. So that's the instant paper preview. The layer settings, I think there's a couple of things in here which are really quite useful. So the layer settings allow you to, per layer, set the impasto depth for that individual layer. And then there's also a little bit of control over the blend modes. So it's the way that when you have multiple impasto, how does that overlap? So there's a couple of options in terms of how deep it is, and you can do that on a per layer basis to show how much the impasto is coming through. And there's also two modes, so there's a normal and a mix, and the mix will bring a little bit more of the underlying impasto through, and just sort of blends in a different way. It's a little bit tricky when you've got impasto on multiple layers in terms of how they should blend together, but there's a couple of really good options there, and that then allows you to work on it. And that's actually quite important, because at the moment there's no concept of drying the impasto on a single layer. So with watercolor, you can put watercolor down and then dry the watercolor. With impasto, when you're painting on that particular layer, then it's effectively, it's always wet impasto, so it's going to move it and smudge it. So if you want to effectively dry that layer, then what you need to do is start a new layer and then paint on top. And that way you can put down more impasto and it will start to build up. The only downside of that is your brushes aren't interacting with the underlying impasto, and that's the same for both the thick paint and also for the watercolors. So when you put watercolor down, it will interact with the texture on that layer, but it's not going to interact with the texture on the layer underneath. So that's something that you kind of need to work through. The way I usually do it is I build up impasto layers, and then when I want to use watercolor, I would just merge those layers together, and then the watercolor is going to work across all that texture. So that is how you can work with multiple layers in that. So there's some good layer settings within that. And then there's a little bit around reflectivity and granulation textures. It's not something I tend to use too often. There's a lot of other, what they've called sort of smaller enhancements. Some of these are actually really useful, and I'll kind of go through those in a bit more detail in sort of future videos. But the one that I really want to call out that I think is absolutely fantastic for traditional artists, and if you're working with sort of traditional sizes, so if you're doing, like an A4 picture, what you can do is to set it up so there's an option to view at print size. And they've done this with a really nice interface. So you've got, for example, A4. And what this allows you to do is you physically put a sheet of A4 paper on top, and then you can move it around to physically line it up with the size of your screen, and that will then set the PPI. Or conversely, if you know the PPI of the screen, you can just type it in and that will calibrate it and set it to the right size. And once you've done that, what you've then got for that screen is something that is now exactly the size that it's going to be printed out. If you're working on a very big piece, then it can be bigger than the physical screen that you're looking at. It still shows you at the print size. It just obviously can't get the whole picture on the screen at once. So that works really well. And it works across multiple monitors. So I've got a Huion tablet, you can calibrate that. And then I've got a big monitor I'm looking at, and you can calibrate that separately. And then they both will show the preview. So I can have the preview on one window, one monitor, and the picture that I'm painting on the tablet, and they can both be the right size. So for traditional artists and people that want to work at specific sizes, that is absolutely fantastic. So I really appreciate that. So I hope that's given you a helpful sort of quick overview. I think what's come through in Rebelle 8 is really shaping up really nicely. I've been really enjoying using it so far. I think the way they've done some of the brushes and the feel of the surface with the real paint and the shadows and the surface texture look absolutely fantastic. So I think this is going to be really good to use going forward. In future videos, we'll do some stuff around some of the other features. We'll do some painting. I would like to do a video specifically around the license, because there's a subtle but important change to the way that they're doing the licensing, which I think is really interesting, actually really good. So I want to do a wee video around that. And then we'll do some more pictures as we go forward. So I hope that was helpful. If you've got any thoughts or comments, as always, please feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, hope to see you again soon. Thanks for watching.